Damn. So basically we're going to be reviewing, let me just get this thing studied, the Verge PC build. So I've been setting this, so we're going to give it a go and have a little look-see and see what's what. Let's do this.
So a few years ago, TC, or Managing Editor, built a gaming desktop, but it's kind of out of date, and it's definitely not going to hold up for Battlefield 5. So let's build a new one.
Battlefield 5, that's...
You can build a gaming desktop for around $1,000, but I want to go all out, so I spent around $2,000. PC
Really?
like this is going to be able to play most
Where'd you get the money for that from?
games at ultra settings. So what do you need
Ultra settings. Well, you can show that off to your mates.
to build a desktop? Well, of course, first you need a table.
Table. I did mine on the fucking floor, but okay. Table is recommended though.
Preferably not metal. If it's going to be metal,
Zp.
have an anti-static working surface layered on top of it, a thermal paste applicator, an Allen wrench, some tweezers to tighten up the wires.
That's a zip tie. Tweezers.
A Swiss Army knife, which hopefully has a Phillips head screwdriver in it.
Just use a normal screwdriver, a Phillips head preferably. What? Yep, hang on, I'm the PC man. I've got a Swiss Army knife. Cut my hair when I do it.
And last but not least, an anti-static bracelet, which is to protect you and the parts.
I buy these once a year for Remembrance Day for £1.
These are the parts you're going to need.
Wait. He's going to use that as anti-static. Raising awareness and stupidity.
But more importantly, before we get there, we need to understand what these parts are doing and how they interact with one another. To better understand the parts that make up a desktop, let's try to understand them individually. The processor is like the computer's brain, a base of calculations that control everything the computer does. The motherboard is like the foundation, serving as a main structure for all other parts to be added to. It also allows the other parts to communicate with one another, which also makes it kind of like a nervous system. Graphics cards are responsible for rendering and processing visuals,
And overheating most of your case. But we'll get back to that later.
into what you see on screen. Our PC's power supply is of course channeling electricity, in that it adjusts and provides the right amount of energy to keep it running. Last but not least, RAM,
Sorry
or
if I'm
random
sniffing.
access memory, and your hard drive are good examples of short-term and long-term memory, respectively.
SSD all the way, baby.
If you want to better understand what kind of computer to build, then first figure out what you want to use it for. A gamer might care more about a graphics card than, say, a video editor who might want extra RAM to assist with editing large files. If you're building a budget build for video streaming, say under $1,000, you want to focus on parts, like a Core i5 or Core i3 processor, that require less energy. They'll be less powerful, but then you'll be able to scale back the cost of several other parts. And if you need help choosing the right parts for your build, there are sites like PCPartPicker.com that help show presets for which parts fit together, which sort of part.
Just speak to your friends and people will know. They'll help you out and not, piss you about. Give you the real shit, the real deal.
Conflicts you might have, and where to find deals on new parts. We have a lot of boxes and a lot of PC parts, so it's best you unbox them, isolate the parts that you really need, place items in.
He doesn't have to unbox them straight away. Just start bit by bit if you know what you're doing. Start with a case, like take the panel off. That's the case usually comes in a box, oddly enough. So you take that out and remove the. You can move both panels if need be, depending on what you're doing. And if you're doing the top, probably the fan. I've actually got I think it's an RX 850 I've got.
To the case and make sure that they all fit and then start working. And now we're really going to start building by adding the motherboard in. Some notes about installing motherboards: they're really delicate, you should be really careful with them.
True.
And screw in with confidence, but also don't screw in too hard.
Screw in with confidence. Gotta screw in, okay?
Otherwise you could crack the board. I chose Asus's Z370 motherboard for two main reasons. One, it has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and also it has support for NVMe SSDs, meaning you...
The second part, NVMe SSDs. Okay, but don't go buying a thing that just has wireless and Bluetooth because it says it does.
You can get really fast SSDs that are really easy to install. Pay close attention to the brace that goes at the back of the...
That's an IO shield.
computer, you always have to make sure that you really hammer it in, because there's no screw. It really just has to go outside of the case and clasp onto the frame. And this is very important because otherwise you can't align the motherboard correctly with the holes. We're just going to start installing all 8 screws.
I didn't say hammer it, don't do that, I'll break it.
So next we're going to install the RAM on the motherboard. I chose Corsair's 16GB Vengeance LED RAM for 2 main reasons. One, it has LEDs and we do like lights in our gaming desktops.
Everyone likes a bit of RGB.
Secondly, it's pretty fast RAM. It's 2666 megahertz, I
Mine runs at 3200.
believe. So it's pretty fast, and this motherboard supports that speed, which is
True, you do need the motherboard that does have the support. So whatever parts you do buy, make sure it's supported in all and compatible. Don't buy them randomly thinking it's going to work. Talk to someone, do your research.
most important. Open the slots first, and just
He's only got 2 sticks. Why is he undoing 4?
aligning the stick with the middle of the strip, not with the end, and just
he's trying to put it in backwards. He's got to flip it round the other way. So see where this CE is on the side there, shall we say? It has to be the other way round. Silly sod.
lining that up with the logo. So once you hear that solid
Is that even in?
clasp and you don't see the gold connectors on the side anymore, that's when you know the RAM is in. Step 3,
Ooh. Ooh. At the bottom there, beneath where it says scroll. He stuck the RAM together. You're supposed to do it RAM, gap, RAM, gap. You're supposed to leave the gap. The channel won't read that way. As soon as he turns it on, it's only going to read 8 gig, not 16. What he wanted.
we need to install the hard drive, or in this case,
So you may think that's a very small hard drive, it looks like a USB stick, but it's not. It's actually a small SSD. Sometimes you get 1 or 2 slots inside the motherboard, which allow you to do that. Otherwise, just buy SSD internally or externally, however you want to do it. Loads so much quicker. I did it recently. I mean, I've got one of those in my PC, and I have another SSD in there. And I recently copied my mechanical hard drive to another SSD, which I eventually bought. Smooth sailing. Apart from the overheat issue I had recently, but it's been perfect since.
the NVMe SSD. I chose this format of solid state drive so that I could input it into the motherboard without having to worry about extra wires or putting it in a separate part of the case and just getting really messy. This is from Kingston, and it's 480 gigabytes, so it's not a lot, but you can always upgrade this and swap it out, and it's only held down by 1 screw and the latch, so it's really simple and really straightforward. Speed for gaming is important when it comes to a hard drive.
True, especially loading levels. And when I'm playing Phasmophobia, I have to wait for like nearly a minute for the next person to turn up because they're still using mechanical hard drives.
You want files to write quickly, and you want games to load quickly, so that's why it's best if you use an SSD.
Screw it down.
Okay, so step 4, we're going to install the graphics card. I chose PNY's GTX 1080.
Why has he not installed the CPU first? You go CPU, RAM, get as much shit in there as you can before you try to even put it in there. And then you're kind of ready, and then put the coolers in afterwards because then you can manually go around the case.
80, which is overclocked.
So this is an old video because you just said 1080.
And so it's a pretty easy installation.
Overclocking, yeah, can be a good thing, but at the same time, think of the heat.
You're just going to find the gold connectors, and you're going to line this bracket with the back end bracket.
He's got a bracket. Everything's a bracket to him. Bracket.
Your PC case. Now, which lane you choose depends entirely on what other parts you're going to put in the system.
No, it doesn't. There is a lane specifically for that graphics card.
I'm just going to pick the top one because the SSD is at the bottom, and
which is generally where it's located.
I don't want to cover it. I just think it looks nice.
I just think it looks nice.
Click down. Take your remaining brackets.
His RAM still connects to each other. That's hilarious.
And just put them in the spots that you haven't used. You don't have to screw these in. They get bolted down by...
Each case is different, so don't worry.
The back end bracket. And your GPU is installed. Power supply time. I chose Corsair's 850 watt power supply because I need enough headroom for ray tracing GPUs when they come out, and I don't want to have to upgrade it again. So all you have to do is take the brick and make sure that you align it with these little insulating pads. so that the power supply doesn't short circuit and come into contact with the rest of the system.
The isolation pads, like isolation, not isolation. He said insulation, didn't he? Thinking of alien isolation from the previous video I just did. Insulating pads. They're actually anti-vibration pads to stop it rattling and rumbling inside. Should it happen? Okay.
So just take it in, slide it in nice and easy until you have a snug fit. And then shift it to the back and make sure it's.
He just put that in with the fan facing the other way, so it's basically going to suffocate. If he faced it towards us, where he's going to put the thing back on, and there's holes in it for it to breathe. Oh my god, he's going to suffocate that by facing it into the mother. Oh my god. Sometimes they can go in that way, but other times you can actually lay them flat, and there'll be a hole most of the time. Well, it depends what case you've got. There'll be a hole at the bottom where the fan can then breathe outwards, like down below, and to breathe out. Because that's what. If I highlight this picture here, so there's this gap between these two stands. Obviously, airflow can go down and into there. But putting too much heat in the case, just boil the bloody thing.
Right up against the frame. Now you just take the required screws and you tighten and screw in. So next step, we're going to install the CPU cooler. In this case, it's going to go on the top end of the case, and we're just going to have the hose hang out for a little while until we install the processor, which is going to come a little later. Always be sure to try to place it in the system first before you install it, because you can see it takes up a lot of space.
A lot of space.
But in this case, no pun intended, it fits in perfectly, and we're going to start screwing it in. And so there's nothing special about this screwing in process. They're just really long screws because they go through the entire frame of the cooler, and they take forever.
They're really long screws because you're supposed to have the fan attached. So you're basically just damaging your radiator with the wrong freaking screws there.
So next up, cables.
There's no fan.
Every power supply is going to come with a big bag of Velcro cables.
Not every power supply.
It's kind of daunting at first, so you always have to find the ones that are going to fit. And this...
They are labelled, or you can easily tell which is which. Fortunately, the back of the unit tells you which is which, and you just follow that round to where it needs to go. I mean, the only thing I forgot to plug in was the CPU power when I first turned it on. I realised what I did. But thanks to Linus Tech Tips, I discovered that one.
In this case, you need to match those cables with the correct descriptions on the power supply. Next step is we're connecting the power supply to the motherboard with a 24-pin cable. We're just matching that cable from the motherboard, threading it through the back, and attaching the 24-pin header to the power supply so that we can have one of the connections complete. The next few additions will be for the GPU, for any specific ports that the case has, for any lighting that the case has, the CPU cooler, anything else really. We're installing the CPU, the heart of the computer or the brain, depending on how you look at it. So to do this, we're just going to remove the plastic covering that they put on the motherboard. We're just going to take this little plastic part out. We'll just toss that out of here.
Don't do that. Should you ever need to return the motherboard, that little plastic's got to go back into there. And it even says it as such. So if there's anything wrong with it, they won't do anything with it because you haven't returned that bit of plastic after you've moved your CPU and that and put that back. Silly sod.
And now we have an exposed CPU holder, or rather slot.
It's called a socket.
On the motherboard. And we're going to use the CPU applicator. This is a special little part that not everyone may get, but this motherboard that we got from ASUS definitely does have.
You don't need that.
It's called a CPU installation tool. It makes it really useful if you want to install a Core i7 hexa-core CPU. Yeah, we've got one, and it's an 8th generation chip, and it's ready to go, and it supports overclocking.
You can buy that anyway now, but I won't recommend it because it's old now. Get a different one. AMD. Ryzen.
So what having this little installer does for you is it's basically a brace that you can apply right to the CPU and light it up with the triangles that you'll see on the bottom left corners. And this
you
will
don't
make
need
it easier
that.
for us to apply it to the motherboard and then apply thermal paste and then apply a CPU cooler on top. And we're just going to carefully lean it down into the system and make sure that everything lines up, and we're going to clasp down on it.
I literally just spotted it, top of his head. There's the special applicator that he just talked about for ages. He didn't fucking use it.
We'll be good to go.
Looks right there, next to his camera. Oh,
So we're about to apply thermal paste to the CPU. Every CPU cooler actually comes with a bit of thermal paste.
not every CPU cooler comes with one.
It's already neatly applied in a circle around it.
Usually
but
enough.
It's
Or just use a pea-size amount in the middle of the CPU if you've got something like that. Just pea-size, be fine.
usually not enough. It's good, essentially PC building practice to have a little bit extra and layer it on top of the CPU.
What are you
The final
doing?
portion
Don't do that. Just a pea-size amount, like he's done there. Just that one, dead in the center, and leave it.
is to add the CPU cooler to the top end of the processor. So you're
A bird has... His RAM's still in wrong. His RAM is still in wrong. And a bird has literally just shat on his CPU, literally.
going to see that there are 4 brackets, or rather like
The brackets again!
screws in here with brackets and holders right here. And
Brackets.
they're going to keep the cooler raised off the processor, but it's also going to be close enough to actually physically come in contact with it, like basically keep it cool.
Snap.
Take thumb screws like this and just screw them on. So now that our internals are done, we're going to put all the panels back on, which is the top glass, side glass, front glass, and of course the back panel where all of this fun stuff is happening.
See, look, that vent.
So
That vent on that side. See, on the case you just put down, there was a vent for that thing to breathe out of.
we fully built the PC.
I will go on about his cable management, but mine's slightly bad. Well, no, to be honest, mine's quite clean, to be honest. I'll be fair. But that's just a fucking mess. Especially them leaving it on top of the graphics card.
Everything's put together, and we got to the post screen.
Got to post.
So what's next? Well, you need a USB flash drive with your Windows installation media on it.
A lot of PCs these days don't come with DVD drives or CD drives, and I'd highly recommend you get your Windows installation also on a USB so it's ready to go.
And of course, a license key. So I plugged that up, installed Windows in a couple of minutes, installed a bunch of drivers, and now we have a fully functioning gaming PC ready to run some games.
It looks like you're using a Wi-Fi adapter on top of that thing, or is that just me? I've got one myself, like from Amazon, but that looks like he's added a Wi-Fi adapter on top of this.
Right now I've got Armor 3 running at maximum settings, native resolution, which is 1080p HD, and it's running pretty smoothly. Like, I'm averaging 70 and 80 FPS, and this is...
That's mainly because it's only rendering the plane. The rest are cheaply done because you're flying through it quite quickly, so it's not rendering the terrain around you as much. Just the plane's being rendered nice and sweetly.
normally like a very intensive game to run, and it's still doing a pretty good job. So right now I'm playing League of Legends.
And he was playing Armor 3. If he was on the ground, it'd be a lot better.
It's one of my favorite games. I'm actually playing against a bot.
League of Legends is actually quite an old game. That's a terrible game to benchmark.
And I'm distracted, so I'm not actually doing so well.
Do they play like that, really?
But otherwise, like, this is pretty much what you would see me do on a gaming computer. Test stuff out, and hopefully have really high frame rates like I am right now. I'm averaging 120 FPS, and that's
Because it's an old game.
only because I've actually locked the game to that frame rate, because I can get around 300 FPS playing League on maximum settings, which is a little bit absurd, and you don't really need that, so I've locked it. Building a gaming desktop has been a great experience. I'm able to max out a lot of my favorite titles, and I'll be able to play a lot of upcoming titles like Battlefield 5 and Cyberpunk 2077 without worrying too much about the parts I have.
Your PC's going to be fucked at this rate. Did he even change the RAM in the
Ray
end?
tracing GPUs come out, for example, I'll be able to upgrade without having to buy a completely new system. And
Wait,
if
they were LED, weren't they? They still look kind of close.
I have a problem down the line, I can always just swap out a part and have it serviced rather than losing my whole computer.
I think he's still got 8
And
gig.
of course now we also have a computer to test and benchmark games here at the Verge.
Yeah, I wouldn't use that PC. Can we get a close-up of what was inside? They're right next to each other. He's only getting 8 gig out of that. He doesn't even realise.
Thanks for watching. Let me know if you've built a computer before yourself, or how you would spend $2,000 on your own build. I'm really
a graphics card's like 1,300, the good one, so that's that chunk gone. Then you got the CPU, probably then the motherboard and the case, and that's about it. And the rest is just like, put on Klarna or PayPal credit, or just go on holiday. Get PS5 and go on holiday. Go on.
Really interested in seeing what sort of parts you guys would get. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to The Verge if you haven't already. So,
No thanks, because you just gave a shitty build. So that's my reaction to the Verge's shitty build. Hope you enjoy, and we'll get back to playing Cloud Marines, because that was just terrible. Don't do that, kids. Don't do that. Right. I'll see you guys later. Bye now. Shit build. Oh.